This is My Playbook. My name is Simon Mundy, and in this podcast, created by Greenhouse Sports, we'll be hearing from a host of inspiring people about who and what influenced, supported, and encouraged them during challenging moments. We'll find out what they learnt along the way, as well as what they want to share and pass on. Greenhouse Sports is the charity that uses sport to help disadvantaged young people and communities. Their core belief is that every child deserves opportunities and a fair chance to get on in life. And through Greenhouse's coaches and partners, they look to make that a reality. The work they do is about encouraging young people through sport and teaching them the life skills they need. Greenhouse Sports has recently celebrated its 20th anniversary. And over the last 20 years, the charity has helped more than 50,000 young people in London. But there are a further 4 million people across the UK right now that they would like to help. And if you would like to find out more about their work and how you could help support another generation of young people, please head to greenhousesports.org to find out more. In the meantime to this episode, in which I speak to entrepreneur, agent, lawyer and mentor Simon Dent. Simon's worked with Greenhouse since its earliest days, first as a coach and then as a prolific fundraiser. Last year he successfully completed a 100-mile charity run alongside rugby league legend Jamie Peacock. And this year, Simon is raising the bar even higher by completing in the Marathon des Sables, known as the toughest foot race on earth. He will run over 156 miles in 6 days while carrying everything he needs to survive on his back, all in one of the world's most inhospitable environments, the Sahara Desert. Clearly, physically it's tough, but this is undoubtedly one of the mentally most challenging events on the planet. We talk about what Simon is expecting to face in both body and mind, and discuss mentors, mental health, and the why that will be driving him through the brutal desert conditions.
I was at the lowest ebb I could ever possibly be, and so for me now, Marathon des Sables is a walk in the park. Nothing will ever be as hard as that, and I think that the Marathon des Sables probably attracts people who've had similar experiences, whereby we've been to dark places. Once you've been to a certain place, there's not much else that knocks you over.
It was a pleasure talking to Simon, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Simon Dent, how lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Friday, sun is shining, can't complain.
I'm very excited to talk to you. I think we've got a fascinating subject to dig into. You've got a long and rich history with Greenhouse Sports as a coach and as a fundraiser, and we are going to get to that. But first things first, you are running the Marathon des Sables. It's dubbed the toughest foot race on earth. It's a 156-mile race, which is equivalent to running 6 marathons in 6 days, with a double marathon thrown in for good measure on day 4, up and down sand dunes in the Sahara Desert, where temperatures regularly reach 50 degrees Celsius. Even just saying what I've just said and describing the race in those terms brings me out in something of a nervous sweat. How does it make you feel?
Yeah, it's funny, when you speak to other people about it, it sounds a bit more serious than when I talk to myself about it in my own head. So I tend not to speak to people about it, to be honest with you. I feel like I've been building up to this for a few years now, and I like testing myself. I like challenging myself. I think, obviously, one of the main reasons I'm doing this is to raise some money for Greenhouse Sports and Debilitatiing Rugby Works. And I think if you're asking people to part with their hard-earned cash, you need to do something quite drastic. So yeah, I'm kind of it's exciting. I'm not daunted by it, and I think I'm capable of doing it.
I like that. Quite drastic. Understatement. And I know you've been putting in the training. I gave you a little buzz earlier and you sent me a picture of you out pounding the streets. And you're obviously a seasoned runner. You've done some epic runs for Greenhouse already, and we'll touch on them in a mo. But I know you've slightly tweaked your training just latterly to prepare yourself for what you're going to be facing out in the Sahara.
Yeah, it's very different to sort of training for a normal marathon. Thankfully, it's not about time. I've been running a lot of sort of marathons over the last few years, and you sort of get really caught up in PBs and splits and your type of trainers and all that sort of carry on. And actually, Marathon des Sables is not against the clock at all. It is just about getting round. So that pressure's removed, which is quite nice. But then there's other things thrown in. I think obviously the fact it's self-sufficient, so we have to carry everything of our own. So apart from water and our tent, so we're going to be running with about 10 kgs on our backs. And then obviously things you've touched on there is running on sand and running into temperatures up to 50 degrees. So it's a few of those variables and factors you can't really train for. But yeah, I can get out of my pack on. And also, as it's a stage race and it's over sort of 6-7 days, just getting used to running when you're tired and you don't get much rest. Because obviously, usually when I run events in the UK, you've got the sort of the dream at the end of a Domino's pizza and a hot bath in your own bed. Whereas I'm going to be dreaming of freeze-dried food, no bed, and little sleep. So yeah, there's a few different factors to consider.
You touched on the self-sufficient part. So as you
Mm.
said, it means you've got to carry everything you need for the whole 6 days on your back as you run. All your clothing, your sleeping bag, your mat, your food, your medical equipment, everything like that. 2 questions. First of all, how packed and ready are you in terms of what you're taking? Have you decided? Because I know people can get a bit neurotic about it. There's stories of people cutting their toothbrushes in half, sawing off the ends of their toothbrushes, weighing out specific amounts of loo roll. Have you been going to the nth degree?
Yeah, I'm sort of entering that world now, to be honest. There's some mandatories we have to take, and that ranges from things such as compasses, a lighter, a distress flare, to an anti-venom pump. But then there are things they describe as a luxury item, and they include within that things like toothbrushes and inflatable pillows. And I mean, obviously, we're not going to have any running water for 7 days or anything like that. There's no toilet. The sort of caffeines of this, the gels and the sort of the things we have to eat to get our calorie camp and carbs in sometimes play havoc with the stomach. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
I heard a few people, or I read a few people say actually that yeah, gels and the classic nutrition that runners tend to go for, actually it's a bit sniffed at. It's more like macadamia nuts, chorizo, that kind of stuff. You just want like really dense, high calorie food, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. You've done your research, clearly. The macadamia nut is, highly sought after in the Sahara. But obviously they're quite difficult to pack. So it's sort of, I'm going with a company called Expedition Foods who prepare freeze-dried meals. So obviously you add hot water or water and you get your meal out of the bag, as it were. We all have to have a minimum of 2,000 calories a day. So they check at the start of the race that we've all got that. And then a lot of people talk about how you do lose your appetite in extreme heat. So as well as taking on salt tablets and lots of water, you have to try and get calories in you. So whether that's, a lot of people talk about biltong is very good, macadamia nuts, you mentioned chorizo, or sort of your more traditional bars. I've tested the freeze-dried food, and actually these days they're quite pleasant. I mean, my dad used to be in the army, and I remember he used to go and exercise and sort of come back with these what were army rations in the 80s. And my God, like things have improved a lot since then. So, yeah, I can't complain.
I've also read about the importance of picking the right shoes. I read one blog where some guy invested in some fancy shoes. He hadn't even run in them before day one. And he said that was the biggest mistake. And he attached a few photos of the state of his feet that were pretty gruesome. So are your trainers run in? And also, have you considered sticking them in a bag and using them as a pillow to save on space? I'm throwing a few free tactics your way here, Simon.
Yeah, no, it's good. I like it. No, I mean, the footwear is important. I mean, just for some perspective for the listeners, we have 25 full-time medics who are on the race with us. And the biggest issue that people have are their feet, mainly because your feet swell twice your shoe size. So I'm an 8.5 here. You're advised to wear a 10.5. But not only that, but it's obviously the lack of washing facilities. So your feet don't get washed for a week. So that's compounded by obviously the heat. Then obviously the running on the sand. So if you think when your foot is in a shoe anyway, it moves enough. When it's on sand, it really moves. So foot care is a massive thing. And so, yeah, I'm very aware that picking the right shoes is pretty much pivotal in this whole expedition.
Okay, so you got to be self-sufficient. So you got to carry everything that is except water that you get given. And I'm going to attempt pronunciation here, bivouac. So
Correct.
which is like a nomadic tent, and you're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with 7 strangers every night. And I've heard that while you don't know them at the start, by the end they're like blood brothers and sisters. Do you know anyone going?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good point, because I think that is one of the main sort of, I think, part of the experience of the marathon sub is sharing with people. I'm quite fortunate, actually. I've been introduced to a brother and sister who live quite close to me. So they're actually coming over tomorrow morning. We're meeting up, we're going on the run together, and we're going for lunch together, just to sort of start to get to know each other. Completely by coincidence, my mother and father-in-law taught them both at school. So
Oh, how funny.
they said they're a really, amazing brother and sister. So I'm excited about that. And I ran a 2-day event a month ago and met another person who's coming. So we created a WhatsApp group, and we've actually now got 8 people. But no, it's a big part of it. And I think you're right, that the sort of sharing of experience like this is really important.
So you sort of feel like you're getting to know them now, but compared to how
Yeah.
deeply you're going to get to know them when you're all digging,
Yeah.
an emotional and spiritual, I've heard,
Yeah.
out there, the difference will be profound. It'll be so surface level at this point compared to, at
Oh,
the
no.
end
At
of.
the moment, the WhatsApp group is very tentative about sort of, has anyone tried this sort of running top? And it's all very, where I can imagine, fast forward day 3, we're all crying into each other's chest.
Yeah.
2 in the morning.
Yeah.
But no, it's good to sort of be introduced to the guys and gals. There's some logistical things that obviously that, you have to then consider. Obviously, some people will be getting back to 10 hours before others. And so from what I've seen from previous years, the sort of rule is that if you get back first, you have to clear the tent, make sure there's no sort of stones on the rug, prickly things, get the fire going. But I suppose if you're first back to tent, you have first digs on where you sleep in the tent, which
Yeah.
apparently the corners are the best, because they're the best shielded from the sandstorms at night.
As well, you're not sandwiched between 2
Yeah.
people, one of whom may be snoring and
Snoring
another.
is interesting. I did actually ask if anyone's a snorer, and no one responded. So
Yeah, well, you're not
that's
you're not going to
real.
share that, are you?
Well, it's a real problem if you've got a snorer, I think.
You a snorer?
I'm not a snorer.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And I have heard that there's more of an air of camaraderie
Hmm.
than competition in the Marathon des Sables, which, as you said, it's not about PBs and times and stuff like that. It's really about getting round together, which is a lovely element.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm all about community. I'm all about building and fostering relationships, and I think it's so exciting that you're going to be not only creating a community with like-minded sort of Brits, but it's a hugely international field. There's going to be, I think, there's 1,100 runners this year from all over the world, and we are all going to be massively tested, but we all have this common goal to get through it. And from what I've seen in previous years, it is very much a team effort, and people really do help each other out, which when we're all stripped back bare, and we've touched on earlier about having no technology, iPhones or whatever, there's no phones work, no internet. It's really quite exciting as to sort of what we can achieve together.
Yeah. And where you're going to go to, that's what I'm really interested in. Because
Mm.
so this morning when you were out doing your 11 miles, you sent me a picture and you had your headphones on. But like you said, you're going to be disconnected, no mobile phone signal, and being alone with your thoughts up and down sand dunes for hours on end. You're going to have a lot of time to contemplate life and what's
Yeah.
important to you, which I imagine will be both torturous as well as beautiful.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, the thing I'm probably most nervous about is that I love journaling and writing things down. I'm a big believer in you don't know what you've thought until you've written it down, and I think that I've got a terrible memory, and I really imagine and I hope I'm going to come up with some really profound things. And I journal every morning and I journal every evening, and so just not having that ritual of writing down, I'll miss that. So maybe that actually I'm going to have to bite the bullet on that and take the added weight of a journal.
It does sound almost like a meditation retreat, albeit a very physically painful one. Is that the sense you're getting?
Yeah, I think that it attracts a certain type of person. Everyone massively goal-driven individuals, of which I am one. So I think it's definitely a like-minded group of people. 30% of the field are ex-services, and within that, a high proportion are ex-special forces across all countries' armies, which is quite interesting. I think that says quite a lot. But I do feel that for me, I just wanted to really test myself. And from the research I'd done, I was quite lucky because I sort of fell into running really. And I'm really blessed that running is something you need zero talent for. Every other sport pretty much has a huge part of it is talents, whereas actually running, all you need to do is put trainers on and walk out your house and put one foot in front of the other. And most people can do that. And I think that for me is quite easy, because if you combine that with discipline, which again, I'm quite blessed to have, a talent in a sport that involves tenacity and discipline, it's right on my sweet spot. So I wanted to test myself for what I've read is the hardest one on earth. So here we go.
And for those moments where invariably your mind is going to be screaming out, please stop, and I've had enough, I'm done, I'm toast. Are you prepared for that?
Yeah, I am. And I'm usually okay with that, right? In England, when I've run ultras and 100-milers, and we did one last year, actually, last Easter, for Greenhouse. We ran 100 miles around London, 3 or 4 of us, and it was incredibly challenging. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It took 24 hours. But I think where it's going to be interesting in the Sahara is because it's really unknown. So the 50-degree heat, the lack of food, I can keep going. But I wonder, there will be a moment where I wonder if there is something that comes into your body that tells you actually you must stop now, because if you don't, something seriously wrong will happen medically.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of, in my head, I do always have this thought of there's always 40% more, and that's gotten me through every other endurance event I've done. But I just need to sort of get my head around that in the desert. And I think the great thing about it is that it's not a race. So, if I am feeling depleted, dehydrated, ill, sick, dizzy, I can stop. I can even have a little kip for an hour. I can get into the shade, I can have some water, and then I can walk. And, it's not like I'm really running against the clock.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there is a clock, but I'm not going to be really pushing myself that hard.
And so you touched on the heat again, the Sahara, dry heat, 50 degrees. You can't prepare for 50 degrees at any time in this country. So how have you prepared for that?
Well, Brighton University, which is just down the road, have a heat acclimatization centre. So I've actually volunteered to be a bit of a guinea pig for them. So the week before I travel to Morocco, I'm going to be in there every day for 2 hours on a treadmill, and they're going to get me up to 50 degrees heat, and they are going to do tests on me. So they're going to be testing my surface temperature, my inner core temperature, and my decision making under heat stress. Now, this is the week that I'll be going, so if whatever they find, it might be a bit late. But acclimatization, it's what professional athletes do before they go and play fixtures or run races in alien environments. So, I do have that, which is good.
But you haven't done it yet.
No, exactly. I was fortunate enough to go to Dubai and Lanzarote recently, and I was out running in what I thought was quite hot, but it wasn't. It was 25 degrees.
Oh, man.
What? I was like, yeah, it's my warm weather training. And I was like, oh my God, it's going to be double this heat. So, yeah, who knows? I think one of the only other things mandatory in the race is salt tablets. So they give you a bag of salt tablets, and I think you have to take one every 2 hours. And there's a high correlation between people who forget to take them and unfortunately those who become very ill during the marathon dressage. So again, it's down to discipline and also not having your decision making impaired because of the heat. Because again, one of the biggest things that happens in the heat is that people forget to drink, they forget to eat, they forget to rest. You've got to stay on point. You've got to get into a routine. But yeah, the Brighton Uni heat acclimatization centre will be a massive help, because if I didn't have that coming up, I probably would be a bit nervous about what would happen on day one at midday.
And I know you've got to have an ECG and full medical as well before you go.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and to be honest, last year before I did the 100-miler for Greenhouse, I went and had a full body MOT, which I don't think I've had in adult life, and that was actually quite daunting, but reassuring when the results came back. So yeah, the ECG, and again, they don't suffer fools. Like, a lot of people get out to Morocco, and on the registration day before you start, people get turned away because the organisers aren't happy. So it's a very professional, well-run event. They do have the safety measures in place. So yeah.
Now let's talk about day 4, the double marathon, because
Mm.
it's all well and good talking about 50-degree heat and stuff. But on
Mm.
that day, or rather that night, you're going to be running in pitch black, a complete 180 from the rest of the experience. So have you done anything to help you prepare for that, which is going to be
Well, that's interesting as well, because obviously worth highlighting that in the desert it can drop to minus numbers at night. So not only, again, this goes back to the self-sufficiency of the race. In our backpacks, we've got to have our sleeping bags, woolly hats, some sort of fleece, because at night it gets really cold. So yeah, think about that. The 4th day, I think we set off, it's going to be 54 miles. So we set off, I think, 9 a.m. Now, the way I'm sort of already planning that day is that it's going to be a walk run day. And I want to be back in camp, preferably by midnight. So that's a sort of 15, 16-hour day. So you've got to factor in not only your nutrition, so you're going to have breakfast, but you are going to have to then, at some point throughout the day, put your stove on and eat a proper meal, because there's no way you can get through a whole day or 16 hours on a breakfast. But then, yeah, when the sun goes down at around 7 p.m., the temperatures drop. So that's an interesting time, because obviously when you've been out running for so long and your body is exhausted and the temperatures drop, you can get yourself in a bit of trouble. So I fully intend to get in around midnight. We'll be lit up by the moonlight. We'll have our head torches on. We will be back in camp. And yeah, a lot of people actually, it can take them up to 24 hours, that leg of it, which is a huge amount of time on their feet. But I fully intend to get back to camp around midnight, and at least that then gives me some rest, some proper rest. Those who attempt that day and end up walking most of it, if you're on your feet for 24 hours, I mean, that is probably harder than running 12 hours. So yeah, that long day is, I think it's the one where sort of up to 30% of the field drop out. So again, it's sort of going back to that point around decision making and how far you can push yourself. I think there's going to be a number of moments in that day where the sort of dark thoughts come in.
Yeah.
And it's just pushing them to one side.
Yeah, sure. To quote Donald Rumsfeld, there are known unknowns and there are unknown unknowns. So that's what you've got to look forward to. But one thing that you do know, I know that there's an app to track you. It's being screened on YouTube. And then quite beautifully, family and friends can email and send texts, and these all get printed out at the end of the day. So, I mean, you're going to be a blubbering mess in the evenings, aren't you?
Yeah, I've just got visions of sort of not Big Brother, Jungle, when they let your family.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's going to be interesting. So the organisers provide an email address for you to give to your family and friends, and I think that's really interesting, because obviously they then print the emails and bring them to your tent at night. And I think for me, that will be correct, blubbering mess.
And just to make that even more impactful, your wife is expecting a baby very soon as well. You're both expecting a baby very soon, so I'm sure that'll be front and center in your mind.
Yeah, that's been timed quite well, I think. So, yeah, we have a baby due on the 13th of June. So it's sort of the last day of the MDS is May 1st. So yeah, it's going to be interesting receiving hopefully receiving some messages from people. If I don't receive any messages from people, but everyone else is receiving loads of messages, that'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, you'll be crying, but for the wrong reason. Yeah,
I'd just be reading everyone else's. No, that'd be cool. And I think, you know what, that going back to sort of, the why and all of this, running to raise money for Greenhouse Sports and Debilitating Rugby Works, I think that will really help me. And I'm sure a couple of the gals from the charities will send me the odd email. And I think that will really, really help, because it's why I'm doing it. And I think that just, and again, the fundraising, and you mentioned about the app where people can follow me. I think I'm doing what I can sort of on social media. I've never been on Instagram before. I've set up an Instagram account to sort of track or sort of, show what I'm doing on the training front. And we've raised around £7,000. I really hope to get that by quite a bit. And hopefully actually the week I'm in the Sahara, we can sort of somehow get some updates to people, and hopefully people following on the app.
Yeah.
Successfully following me on the app, and I'm not sort of disappearing off in the wrong direction.
Yeah. If we see your blip heading off in an awkward direction, we'll be sure to send a text. Get after him. So, as you mentioned, you're raising money for Greenhouse Sports, and you've got a rich history of raising money for Greenhouse. I know you've raised 6 figures for them. You did 100 miles, as you said, last year, and you were doing that with Jamie Peacock, rugby league legend, who's also a cracking fella, and you did 52 miles with him the year before. So you've got a rich history with Greenhouse Sports in terms of fundraising, and I know it goes more than that, and I'll ask you about that. But in terms of the fundraising, just give us a bit of an overview of what you've done for Greenhouse over the years.
I mean, I think as you touched on, I first came into contact with the charity probably in their first or second year that they were going, which is probably about 18, 19 years ago now. And I was kindly introduced to Mike DeGiorgio, the founder, by a good friend of mine, Shane Mitchell, who used to do a lot of work with Greenhouse back in the day. They used to be based in Shepherd's Bush, and I lived around the corner. And I did a bit of coaching for them down in Burgess Park when they had football as one of their sort of programs. I stayed in touch with Mike over the years, and then probably about 6 years ago, my business Dark Horses, a creative agency based in Farringdon, we did some work for Greenhouse and helped them with some marketing and created some sort of activation and creative assets. And so that really sort of triggered me to reconnect with the charity, and they've obviously had moved on massively in that 20 years, providing after school coaching for over 6,000 children now, primarily in London, but they've now moved out to sort of other parts of the country. And so, it was really about helping them raise some money. And as you said, I can't claim much credit for the big fundraisers, because having Jamie Peacock alongside you really helped me get some attention on what we're doing. But we ran 52 miles in 2021. We ran 100 miles last year, and the combined fundraiser on them is about £120,000. So really proud of what we've done. But I think it's I didn't want it to stop with 100 miles last year. So hence, moving the dial up to the marathon. So God knows what we're going to do next year.
Oh, mate, Simon, I dread to think. I really dread to think.
I already have ideas.
But you clearly then have a real affinity for Greenhouse Sports. You've been involved as a coach, as a fundraiser for a couple of decades. And obviously I've got to know the charity through doing this, and the work they do is really profound, isn't it?
It really is. And I can't imagine my life without sport. And I think as a child growing up, all my best memories, my fondest memories, whether that's in the garden, after school, at school, with friends, Saturday morning, Sunday, summer evenings, whatever, were based around sport, and the simplest of sports, whether it was, football, whether it was, a game of tennis, whether it was a table tennis, whether it was basketball, whatever it was, my defining moments of childhood. And then, of course, we're talking about me running now, like it's a sport. My career has always had sport baked into it. I've been a sports agent. I've run a creative agency focused on sports marketing. And so it's such a massive part of my life. And, the amazing work the charity does is obviously gives children access to sport that otherwise wouldn't have. And that for me is so, so powerful. And it makes me really sad to think that some children don't have access to sport. And the reason I'm doing this is to help fund coaches. And it costs roughly around £25,000 to get a coach into a school. And so that is, for a year. So for me, I say we've raised 7,000. I'd love to get it close to 25,000, because at least then we know that we've provided another school with access to a coach, a full-time coach for 1 year, which, that's probably going to have a positive impact on hundreds of children's lives, which is a real motivator.
Sport can obviously have such a profound impact on people's well-being, self-esteem, all those things, but it's about more than that at Greenhouse as well, isn't it? It's the sort of mentoring side of coaching and providing that someone who really gets to know their mentees and can almost be like either a bigger brother, a bigger sister, or a parental figure, and provide some of these kids with the love and attention perhaps they haven't always been getting in other areas. And I know mentoring and that kind of thing is important to you too. I know it's something you take seriously. So what do you make about that side of what Greenhouse does and the impact it can have?
Having positive role models in your life, especially when you're young, is so important. And I think that a lot of the children that Greenhouse have exposure to or work with are unfortunately from single parent homes and are missing usually a father figure, role model, and positive role model. And I think the coach at Greenhouse can become that. And there's so many fantastic stories. And I even, I'm mates with some of the people that have been through Greenhouse and have benefited from Greenhouse, and they're doing the most amazing things. And that they weren't dealt a very fair hand at the start in life, but because of the influence the Greenhouse had on their lives, they're now doing incredible things within society, but also spreading the Greenhouse message. So it's hugely, hugely important. And there's so much going on in the world, and there's so much negativity in the world. And obviously, we're 3 years post the start of the pandemic, and it's that's created its own problems in the communities that Greenhouse are in. So yeah, I'm beating my drum as loud as I can to shine a light on Greenhouse. And as I said earlier, hopefully we can raise some money. But even if we don't raise money, just the spreading of the name of the brand and increasing the awareness will hopefully help. Because as you said, these coaches are fantastic people, but they need funding.
And this series has been about mentors, and we've all been impacted by people at key moments during our lives, or those fortunate enough to have had those. So can you think of any mentors or key people who've really inspired you or helped you at key moments of your life to get you to where you are now?
Oh, it's a really good question, because I think it's something I think about a lot. And I think that through no fault of anybody, I think that I don't think I had really any when I was growing up, when I was young. I think probably back in the 70s and 80s, it was just a bit different. The way the world was then was that you sort of just got on with things, and unless someone was visibly not quite right, I don't think people ever felt the need to ask someone or give someone the opportunity to have someone to mentor them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I actually think that it was really after I had my own challenges with mental health in my sort of early 30s, when I fell out of the legal profession and sort of went on the journey that I'm now on in sort of managing talent and running and owning a creative agency. I think that I met some really amazing people. I think I've been very blessed to work with some of the best professional sportsmen and women in this country, and they've provided me with huge amounts of inspiration. I've had businesses with the likes of sort of Lawrence Dallaglio, who obviously Dallaglio Rugby Works, we're also raising money with. But yeah, I think there's a number of people in adult life who I've sort of spent time with. But to be brutally honest, I've sought people out through literature, through reading. I try and read 2 books a month. So I feel like I have around me a group of amazing people that I don't know, they don't know me, but I know them. And every time they post something on YouTube or release a book, I absorb it. And as you know, I'm really keen on meeting people and sharing information. We're part of a WhatsApp group that's been going sort of 4 years now, whereby I think there's over 100 people in it now, and it's a collection of people we've all met each other through different walks of life, but we all now sit in this WhatsApp group and share information. There's everyone, from elite sportsmen to founders, entrepreneurs, multimillionaires, recovering drug addicts, recovering alcoholics, all sharing information and messaging. And, that group's called the Tribe of Mentors. And I think everyone in that group is a mentor, and it's the sharing information that's so powerful. So I'm a huge believer in mentorship. I wouldn't like to sort of, name names, but there are some people that have had a profound influence on my life in the last sort of 5 to 8 years.
Yeah, I completely understand what you say about the 70s and 80s. I can really resonate with that. And I interviewed for my own podcast a guy called Bessel van der Kolk, who's written the very famous book on trauma called The Body Keeps the Score. And he speaks about, we tend to think of trauma as a bad event, but actually not being seen and heard can be just as impactful. Actually, he gave a really interesting example of during the Blitz, the kids who stayed behind in London with their families and were surrounded by bombed out buildings and could see death actually coped emotionally better than the kids who were sent away from their families to the safety of the countryside.
No.
So you touched on growing up without necessarily feeling like you had that. And, and I can relate to that. And then bringing it back to Marathon des Sables, where you're going to be stripped down and you're going to get into the weeds, if you like, of your own psyche to a degree. Are you conscious that you might kind of go to some of those places?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, as I said, probably not the forum to go into too much detail, but as I said, I had some challenges in my mental health, and that results in me being a day patient in a private hospital for 6 months and stripping me down to my bare bones. And I was at the lowest ebb I could ever possibly be. And so for me now, Marathon des Sables is a walk in the park. Like nothing will ever be as hard as that. And I think that the Marathon des Sables probably attracts people who've had similar experiences, whereby we've been to dark places. And I know that because of that, and it's not a badge of honor or something I'm proud of, I have a high pain tolerance. And I do know that again, when the ultra running community, you often stand at the start line and you can just see the fire behind people's eyes. Like there's a lot of people that have been through similar experiences, and mine's just, relatively small. There's people who've been through some horrific traumas. I regard, my mental health problems, they were what they were, and I got on with it, and I'm here now. But I do think that, once you've been to a certain place, there's not much else that knocks you over, and that is quite reassuring. I'm not proud of it, because maybe I wish I hadn't have had that happen to me, but then it is what it is.
Yeah, it's part of your story, right? And I appreciate you sharing that. And it's like you said, it's made you who you are, and there's no shame in that. I think we all have our demons, and we all have things to face, don't we? And I think a line that I read about the Marathon des Sables, which I thought was really beautiful, is that the organisers say there's a pre-Marathon des Sables version of you, and then a post-Marathon des Sables version of you. So I can't wait to hear how you go. And I just want to say, stay safe, come home in one piece, and absolute best of luck. I can't wait to hear all about it, and I can't wait to keep tabs on you to make sure that you stay on the straight and narrow, quite literally.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I appreciate that. And I'm as I say, I'm looking forward to it. I've trained hard. I'm not being reckless. It's not something, I am taking it seriously. We've had a bit of a joke about it, but I'm taking it very seriously, and I'm well and truly loading the bases in my favour to get it done. But no, I'll definitely report back.
Yeah.
And maybe, we'll do a sort of post-Simon Dent Marathon des Sables.
I would love to hear about it. I think you're in for a truly profound experience, and I really can't wait to hear about it. And I would just encourage anyone to follow you and give money and send texts and all that stuff.
Brilliant. I'll keep you posted how I'm getting on.
Do it. All right, Simon Dent, thank you so much for talking. It's been lovely speaking to you.
Thanks, Simon. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of My Playbook with agent and entrepreneur Simon Dent. As I mentioned at the start, Greenhouse have recently celebrated their 20th anniversary. Please do check out the incredible work they do by visiting greenhousesports.org And if you would like to get involved and help, please do get in touch. All the details are on their websites. And please do share, rate and review this episode wherever you can. Thank you for listening, and until next time, goodbye.